Hi everybody, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and today we're going to take a look at, unfortunately maybe, but I hope it'll be okay, a couple of Blitz games that I played relatively recently. So this first one is against some random IM, and the position we have on the board is of course an endgame, bishop versus knight. I'm up a pawn, but needless to say, my pawn structure in some ways doesn't inspire any confidence at all. So I've got two sets of doubled pawns. My queen side, all the pawns there are isolated pawns. So it might not seem at first like this is really anything so fantastic for white. But I had seen this position coming a ways off, at least, relatively speaking, in the context of Blitz chess anyway. And I felt that I had a few things in my favor. So first of all, I liked that I had this kingside space advantage. Certainly took this to be an asset. But most importantly, I realized that his knight was more or less dominated in this position. So, if he brings his knight to c7, I'm going to bring my bishop to c4, basically anywhere on this diagonal, on the f1 a6 diagonal. And then he's not going to be able to make any real progress with his knight. He has various weaknesses on his king side. He's got all these pawns on light squares. That makes them permanent targets for my bishop. Also, he's got to be careful about my king penetrating over there. So I felt like I would have good winning chances in this position. Certainly, I don't think that this is a win yet by any means, but I felt like I can play here and have some chances. So here's how the game went. So it was his move. I had just recaptured a piece, making the second set of doubled pawns. Actually, that's not true. I had doubled pawns on the F file. Now they're doubled on the E file. So here he played, of course, knight to C7. I keep the knight shut in. And now he plays G5. And this is an interesting move. So my opponent, of course, doesn't want to just get strangled here. And he's worried that I'm going to play things like F4, maybe H4. Although I'm not sure that I want to play both. But I probably do. And then he is again going to remain kind of locked up. All these pawns on light squares can become victims later on. So let's say if his king comes out, running her out, there are going to be possibilities with my bishop coming behind his pawn structure. Okay, it's a little difficult to see how that would work given where his knight is. I mean, E8 is covered, but there are possibilities like that. I could play something like H5, let's say, well, maybe something like F5, I'm thinking, okay, here's an example. All right, let's say I play the pawn to h6, I play the pawn to f5, I take, and then bishop h5, bishop g6. I mean, again, none of these are necessarily going to work, but they're tactical possibilities that are in the air. They're things that black has to worry about. So it's very natural for black to want to put pawns on dark squares here, or at least get one pawn on a dark square. The problem with this, though, is that it gives me more easy entry routes into his king side. So it might be the case that he should just essentially sit in this position and try to do nothing if he can. I'm not sure that he can. I think on the queen side, let me get rid of all of the color stuff here. I'm not sure that he has an airtight blockade on the queen side. So for example, all right, let's say I bring my king to b4. I play bishop to b5 and play c6. Okay, he plays b6, and then I play either c4, c5, or a4, a5, or maybe both. And I may have a path of egress, or not egress, ingress into his position. So I'm not sure that he has an airtight blockade. He might be able to blockade, but again, there are problems. So I've got the extra pawn on the queen side. I've got various breakthrough possibilities on the king side. So it's not an easy position for black to play. Again, I suspect it's probably a draw. But there are problems still to solve. So my opponent played g5, and I played king to g2. So here comes my king, in part because I don't want to let him get his king active with something like king g7, f6, and get too active. So I'm, in part, just bringing my king to combat anything he might be up to. So king g7, king g3, king g6, f4. All right, so I'm, again, fighting for activity and for space over here. He played h6, I played h4. And, okay, so now perhaps he was concerned that I might consider something like f takes g5, h takes g5, and h5 check, creating a passed pawn. And it's not that that pawn's ever going to queen, but it ties him down. So his king is going to be stuck there, and then I can bring my king over to the queen side and attempt to make some kind of break over there. So if that was his concern, it explains his next move, gh4, king h4. But now it's getting happier, so I believe that I can more or less put him into a sort of zugzwang here. So my aim is to get the king to h5 and or to play f4, f5. Okay, he played a6, and here, see if you can figure out what white's move should play. I did not succeed in this task, by the way. Okay, well here I was concerned about him playing knight to b5, so I didn't want to. I mean, I don't think that I want to allow that necessarily, but I had a better move than a4. So a4 is okay, but I had something better, and it was this: f5 check, ef, bishop h5 check, king g7, e takes f5, and the problem for black is that now that the h1 a8 diagonal is open, I no longer have to worry about his knight moves because I can bring the bishop back to f3 and get this guy on b7. So knight to d5, f6 check, and bishop f3, and white's winning. So I didn't see this idea. It is a 5-minute game after all. So a4, a5, and now king g4. So I just continue my plan. If he plays h5 check, I play king h4, and the pawn's going to drop. So he played king to g7. Now I played king to h5, and I'm winning here too. So even if f5 check was a very elegant solution a few moves ago, this very methodical approach seems to be perfectly good as well. So king h7. I should say, of course, if he doesn't retreat his king, I'm still threatening f5 check. So I'm going to get my king to h5 and my pawn to f5 one way or another. Okay, he played king to g7. I played king to h5, king h7, bishop c4, and he played king to g7. So I'm thinking, okay, I want to play f5, but maybe I want to play f5 when he can't play f6 in response. So a very typical trick here in positions where you've got your opponent almost out of moves is to do the old lose a tempo thing. So rather than playing f5 anyway, or panicking or just switching ideas, I realized, okay, if it's black's move in this position, I get what I want. So bishop to d3, king h7, bishop to e2, king g7, bishop to c4. And, okay, so this is something that I was after. All right, so he played king h7, and now f5. So there we go. Just using this standard little trick. Okay, he plays king to g7, f6 check, king h7. And once again, I have the same that now I'm not moving anymore. So if he moves his king, he loses the h-pawn. If he moves his knight, I have bishop takes e6. Good times. So I engaged here in a little more triangulation. Of course, it's a little bit silly. Oh no, I was thinking just now, well, maybe I can play bishop to a2, but then he plays knight a6. Okay, I can still take on e6. He can take on c5. I take on f7. This should be good for me as well, but there's no reason to allow any counterplay here from black with knight to a6. So just bishop to e2, knight e8, bishop to b5, knight c7, and bishop to c4. And here, he played knight to e8. I took f7, and I queen. So the funny thing is, he can play knight to g7 check and save his knight with check, but after king to g4, now there's a barrier between his king and my pawn, so he can't go to g7 to stop it. So he resigned here. But one more interesting point, though, in this game. He didn't have to play knight to e8. He could have played knight to a8, and the bishop takes e6 trick doesn't work. So in part, I was kind of hoping that he would just keep going knight e8, knight g7, or knight c7, and it worked. But how do I win in this position? So this is a little puzzle for you to try to solve. Okay, well the answer here is that I should play like this. Bishop to b5, knight c7, and now c4. Okay, so again, he's almost out of moves. Very bad position. what can he do? King goes back, king h6 is easy, and I'm just going to have more zugzwangs after that. So knight to a8, bishop to e8, king g8, king h6. Okay, so there's more progress, but I still have to win the game. So knight to c7, bishop to b5, again to stop knight a6, king h8, and still, how do I win here? Okay, here's the answer. Bishop to d7, threatening to go to c8, and let's say knight to a6, and now c6 takes, and bishop takes e6. So back to that again, and this finishes the job. Okay, so that was one of the games. I thought it had a reasonably interesting ending, and these tricks with losing a move, very, very useful in a lot of endings. Certainly bishop versus bishop when the defender's bishop is very passive, and really any ending where your opponent is very passive, you should always keep an eye out for the possibility. You should keep an eye out and see if my opponent has very few moves here, maybe there's some way I can put him in zugzwang and see, is this position zugzwang if it's my opponent's move? If it is, then look for a way to lose a move, to lose a tempo. Find a way to achieve in 3 moves what you could normally achieve in 2, and that'll have the desired effect. Okay, so let me show you another game now that I played. This one's against a grandmaster. I had white again, and here we have a very theoretical line. Not sure this is part of my normal opening repertoire with white, but just experimenting with a few things. Okay, here g5 is Morozovic's pet move, but f6 is a very, very well-known line as well. And so all of this is theory, and actually reasonably well-known theory up to this point. And here he played knight c to d7, which I think is a new move. I don't know if this was any kind of preparation. I think we had both kind of roughly gotten to the end of what we knew, and he made a move that looked natural. Okay, so here I have to think, what do I do in this position? And, well, one of the points behind queen to b1 is not just to seize this diagonal from b1 to h7 and protect the b4 pawn, but it also has the nice benefit that it clears the c file for the rook. And so now there are various possibilities based on my rook being opposite his queen. So knight to b5, knight to d5 are at least moves that could be played at some point. Okay, well here he played g5, attacking my bishop, and I don't want to just play bishop takes e5. I mean, this would not be any kind of success at all. Bishop e5, you can play queen takes e5. This queen is good. It's off of the file, and I've just given up the bishop here without really acquiring anything by way of compensation. So I played knight to b5, and after queen to b8, played knight to d4. Okay, so this looks much more appealing. And of course I had this was something I had to calculate, because after g takes f4, if I play knight takes e6, then he takes the bishop, the knight on e3. But okay, g takes f4, and I have 2 pieces under attack, so I regain my piece. It turns out, though, that knight e6 was in fact better. So this is a really nice move. After f takes e3, I don't play knight takes d8, but play f4. And strangely enough, I get a tremendous attack. So rook, knight to f7, and now rook a3, and rook takes e3. And in fact, white's position is winning here. So it's kind of interesting. It's the sort of sacrifice idea you would expect to see in a Sicilian, in a knight or, for instance, but this is kind of an unusual circumstance for it. Okay, well in the game I played gf, and he saved his bishop. I took, he took, and I think I'm still a bit better here. I mean, this is like what we mentioned before with his queen on e5, but the difference here is that his pawn structure in the center and kingside is much worse than it was before. And my pieces are going to have access to very good squares. So f5, for instance, is a lovely square for knight to sit for a long, long time. b5 is also coming, and then d5 might be a square. I have this diagonal to play with. So this is definitely a good position for white. Well, first things first, I have to save my knight, so I played rook to d1. And now he played h5. Okay. The idea behind this is not that he's going to mate me or anything, but I think he wanted to put the bishop on h6 and have it defended by the rook. Also, it stops any knights at g4 possibilities, but it's a little bit of an abstract move. Anyway, my move is not abstract at all. Very direct. b5. Trying to, of course, extend the diagonal and give myself the d5 square. So c5, knight d to f5, and I stand much better in this position. Well, now he plays rook to g8. Okay, I'm not interested in staying on this open file, so king to h1. And now he plays b6, saving the pawn. But, okay, this is again very appealing to me. My bishop can come to c6, and I mean, you can see his king is just completely stuck. I mean, he can't castle on either side. In fact, his king can't move anywhere at all, and he's a sitting duck. Okay, well, what should white to move do in this position? Certainly something like bishop to c6 is natural and attractive and probably not bad at all, but I think I found something even better. So this is a move that I like, and this is probably the reason why I'm showing this game. Okay, well, the move I played here was a5, and I think this is a very good move. Does a few things. So one is that it's preparing to open up the a file. So there can be lines where I take on b6. Okay, he recaptures. I play bishop to c6, and then I play rook to a7, or maybe in some cases play rook to a8. And he's got huge troubles. But there's also a second idea, which is quite nasty. He played h4, and I played rook to a4. And now this is an absolute disaster for black. So rook to e4 is coming up, and well, this just decides the game. I mean, here white is simply winning. So he played h3. Okay, I played bishop to c6. I could probably play rook to e4, but there's no reason to give him as much material as he would get there. And the game is basically over at this point. He played bishop to e7, rook e4, and is just losing tons of material. Okay, he played king to f8, and I didn't feel like cashing out with just a queen for a rook, so I played bishop d7, and now I took this guy. Okay, bishop to e6, so more threats, and he resigned. Okay, quite overdue. I don't think I was especially short on time, but maybe I was a little bit short. Anyway, clearly this is a devastating position, and really the key move, of course, is a5. So the thing I like about this is that it's multi-purpose. So I'm finding ways to get more pieces into the attack. I mean, you look at the position here, and it's hard for me to really increase what I've got in terms of my initiative. I mean, I could play bishop to c6, and I can maybe play queen to d3 after that, but he just plays queen to c7 or bishop to e6, and everything is covered. My knight on e3, okay, it's got a job to do, more or less. It's protecting the knight on f5. I mean, of course, my queen's doing it too, but I can activate one or the other, but not both at the moment. The bishop on g2, okay, we know it's going to go to c6, but everything else is more or less perfectly placed. So the old rule of thumb, or the old, not really rule of thumb, but the old saw or phrase or slogan, invite all your, how does it go? I'm trying to remember how Sirwan puts it exactly. Invite everyone to the party, I think is what he says. And Agard in his book, his attacking manual, says use all your toys, or play with all your toys. So whatever way you want to phrase that bit of wisdom, it's true. You'll often find positions where you've got a lot of attackers, and they're all right in the heart of the attack. So you might just kind of focus too much on them, and instead, sometimes it might be the key. It might be the one thing you need is to bring in a last piece. Bring in one more piece that doesn't really seem to be doing anything, and it might be so far off that you don't even suspect that it could be useful. But here, okay, we can see, once we think about the rook, what would it like to do? Well, there's the a file, and there's the up and over. So the old rook lift trick. So a5, rook a4, and the game is over. So even my opponent, for all of his excellence as a chess player, there's just too much for him to deal with in this position, and he couldn't find any way to handle it. So I think this is a pretty decent game. Maybe not quite perfect, because knight takes e6 here, I think, is an improvement over what I played. But by and large, I think a pretty well-played game, maybe even of a little bit of theoretical significance. So it at least shows that his novelty is one that maybe doesn't merit a further look. So the moves, by the way, that have been played here are knight to b3, and white's done pretty well there, and knight to a6. Actually, white's done pretty well in both cases, but you always have to check what the latest game is. So even if white is going 75%, it's often the case in sharp lines like this that black just needs to find the one right idea, and then all those previous games don't really matter. But anyway, it does show that the natural knight c to d7 probably is not so good. I think white is gaining an advantage by pretty clear means there. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and close here. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry it wasn't a slow game with the GM, but I haven't gotten to play any tough guys in quite a while. So hopefully that'll get fixed in the next month or two. But hopefully this is at least an okay substitute for the meantime. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.